Welcome to my Just Jenny podcast. With me is Emmy award-winning journalist Tamsen Fadal, who I am. Welcome to my podcast. Let's start there.
Yep. Nice to see you.
It's nice to see you. I'm convinced we've met at some point through the years, just being in New York, sort of in the media landscape. There was a period of time that I did a lot of TV. You've always been on TV.
But I've been in New York for so long. We've probably met at something and said hi and hugged. For sure. And then
gone our separate ways.
Life happened.
But you have become this sort of menopause advocate, and menopause and perimenopause, it's like my favorite conversation. And because at 53, yeah, I know. And I love that because at 53, Tamsen, like I am perimenopausal and it sucks. Yeah. And I talk about it constantly because it sucks. And I feel like women need to really get into it because I woke up this morning and my boobs are so big and my belly is so big. I have no idea why. I thought I ovulated last week, which would have been when my boobs are even bigger and my belly was even bigger, and I'll get my period in a week, maybe. I don't know. And so though my period's pretty regular, I'm waiting for it to not be because I'm 53. So at some point it's going to not be regular. And when I say regular, it shows up, but there's nothing regular about any of it anymore.
Nothing. Starting very soon. Everything will not be right. It will be regular to not be regular.
Right.
Yeah, I got to tell you, that's what happened to me. I was like, oh, yeah, easy. I glided through life. I guess now I realize in retrospect, periods on time, not a problem, not too heavy, not crazy. None of that kind of stuff. It was just very, very normal. And I hit perimenopause, but I didn't know I hit perimenopause. And so I dealt with these symptoms. And then the big one for me, though, and you'll understand this, and I think so many women do, is brain fog. Like my ability to pull words, my ability to read a teleprompter, which is what I do every day of my life, my ability to have a conversation with confidence, all shot. And so that was really big on top of those physical symptoms. So yeah, I am with you, but the fact that you're talking about it and you know the word perimenopause and you're having a discussion openly, you're like light years ahead of where I was.
Well, I think it's because I started to learn about fertility back when I was in my 20s. I was just so curious about it. And I had read a book by Tony Wexler, maybe, I think it was called Taking Charge of Your Fertility. And it was the first time that I had ever seen anything written about what our bodies do every month, that we have vaginal discharge, which no one ever talked about. I mean, my mother never talked about it. Nobody ever said, like, in the middle of the month, you're going to goop, not just Gwen's company, you're going to goop. And that goop is called fertile mucus. And that's whatever.
Yeah, so it's not a skincare product.
Correct. And right. And nobody ever talked about kind of like the signs and symptoms of not just fertility, but then of perimenopause, and that it can be for 10 years. It could be for 10 years. And I definitely started to feel strange, probably 47, 48. I started to feel weird. And that's what I mean. Like, yes, the brain fog, but everything, like mood swings,
everything,
energy level, bloating,
libido or lack of,
general malaise, the whole thing. And so few people, like just now, Tamsen, like you were ahead of the sort of the game, but like now, because Jennifer Aniston's talking about it or Courtney Cox is talking about it, it's like chic to go through menopause now because the movie stars are doing it. And I'm like, well, couldn't we have talked about it 5 years ago?
Well, that, I know, I get it. And and it's funny, but it's chic in some circles, and in others, like every once in a while I'll show up and I'll say something, even if it's a group of women, and a friend of mine actually today goes, can you stop with the menopause talk? It's like, ugh. And I said, no, I can't stop with it, because unless you tell me that every woman that I'm going to come into contact, and man, by the way, who is around a woman or is related to a woman or works with a woman, knows the same conversation, then you know what? No, I can't stop talking about it. And that's how I feel. And and I was one of the, when I came out of the gate, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to hurt my career by talking about menopause? And I'm, that here's where I am. That's how warped, our minds are about that that word. And
Right.
so, yeah, look, I'm grateful that you're having a conversation about it. I'm grateful that we are,
Mm-hmm.
because I think for every one of these, there's thousands of women that have not heard the word perimenopause or understand what they're going to be going through. And every woman is going to be going through it.
And you're right, Tamsin, because it's almost like women were our own worst enemy, because I have had women on my show, and like you were just saying, I thought that there was a connection, a bonding moment about the fact that we're
Hmm.
similarly aged. And I
Hmm.
would say something like, oh, this perimenopause is killing me. I'm exhausted or whatever, or my belly's weird or whatever. And this one guest who I just, I don't really believe it. But and this is a while ago, so anyone listening who's like, "Who was it? Who's she talking about?" You're not going to know,
Who is it?
but it's not going to happen. But I just remember her saying something like, "Yeah, I don't have any symptoms at all of perimenopause or
I
menopause. I have
breezed through it.
nothing. I have nothing." She was still had her period. I have nothing. I don't have any of the anything. And I just said to myself, like, A, she doth protest too much,
Yes.
and that's because there's still this like stigma around
Sure.
it.
Sure there is.
And it's, but what, like, this is a biological thing that any cisgendered female is going to go through. So why the stigma?
From such a, I did a lot of history, looking back at history, trying to figure that out. Cause I thought like, why is that word when I began researching this and talking about it on my podcast, I'm like, why is the word, taboo always go along with that? It would
Yeah.
irritate me. And, there was a time where women that were going through menopause, that's where the word, the hysteria came from,
Hysteria.
like the
Yes.
hysterical women, the crazy,
Ugh.
that's where those words came from. And so when we refer to women in those ways, we bring up that all that problem, everything that we've carried through the years. And when you don't know where things have come from, and then you learn where things have come from. And I went, oh my gosh, like that is exactly what we say, like, oh, she's crazy, she's this, and so I try really hard to talk about it in a different light, and then also talk about that history, because it's so important to understand how far we've come, yet how far we need to go. By the year 2025, 1 year from 2 years from now, year and a half, I guess, 1 billion women across the world will be in menopause in one of those stages. And I
Of
find that
course.
incredibly fascinating, because once you hit menopause, you're that menopause is just that one day, after you haven't had a period for 12 months, then
For
you're
12 months. That's right.
postmenopausal.
That's right.
Right. And so we're talking about 1 billion women globally. That's something you have to pay attention to. Workplaces
Yeah.
have to pay attention to it. Men have to pay attention to it. Women have to pay attention to it, whether you're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. You don't want to wait until you're 47, which is exactly when, I had my instant in the studio, to pay attention to it, because I was way, way behind.
So Dr. Mary Claire Haver, who's a friend of mine, says
I love her.
we as women, she's best, are gonna have a third of
Yeah.
our lives are gonna be spent in menopause.
Hmm.
So at
Right.
some point, make friends with it. Like, recognize this is what
Yeah.
it's going to be, and
Yeah.
kind of get over it, because get over sort of the negativity surrounding it, because that we're doing that to ourselves, and we don't
Yeah. The
have to
stigma
do
of
that
that
to ourselves.
title.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
Because there's
The stigma of
the
that title.
and if you look at you, Tamsin, you're a beautiful woman. You look as female as any
Thank you.
female looks, right? You're not, I'm not looking at you
Thank you.
thinking, oh, she's hit androgyny because she went through menopause. But
Right.
that is
Right.
kind of a myth that all of a sudden, like, men become women,
Yeah.
women become men as we age. And it's not really true. I mean, yes, there is less elasticity, and no, we're maybe not as full in the face as we once were, because we're not
Right.
children, but we're not supposed to be.
We're not, this conversation, it comes up for me, I'm always asked questions like, what are you going to do to, what do you want to do to keep your looks? How far are you going to go to do that? Like, it doesn't mean that I don't care about how I look, but I'm not going to fight looking like I did 20 years ago. First of all, I
Yeah.
don't have the time in a day to do that. I
No,
put
you
so
don't.
much crap all over me right now, like
Yeah.
lotions, potions,
And
this,
you're
that. I used
busy.
to take 5 minutes to, I'm busy. I used to take 5 minutes to get into bed if I remember to brush my teeth. Now I got to put crap everywhere. So I don't have time to do that, but I'd like to look as good as I can for where I'm at. And I also want to be proud of it. I want to be proud of where
And
I've
you're
come.
on
That doesn't mean to, you know,
television.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, you
You know
have to
what's
look
funny? And
beautiful.
you know
Yeah.
this, but you know this about media is that there was a time when and I was told this years ago. I remember in Philadelphia, I was sitting next to a woman who was about 15 years older than me, and she said to me, you know, women age out of this business, so have a plan B. And I said, what does that mean? She goes, well, you know, you're not going to always be, you know, this age, you know, early 30s, you're not going to be always be like that, and you're not going to hit 50 in this business. And I went, oh, what? So I lived with that, and I think a lot of us did live with that fear of like the older anchor man and the younger woman sitting next to him that, you know, is, you know, whatever, 30 years younger. And I'm so grateful to see that changing so much. It's changed over the years in this business, but there's so many other areas that it has to change in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely dipped out of the whole thing at like 44,
Yeah.
45. I was like, I don't want to fight to be on TV anymore because there's going to be someone
Yeah.
thinner and blonder. By the way, I'm a redhead, but still, I was like, there's going to be someone younger, thinner, blonder. And I never thought to
That's what I always
myself,
say. Younger,
right.
thinner, skinnier. What
Yeah.
is it?
And I never thought to myself, like, oh, they're going to be smarter or better than me because
No.
that wasn't
Nope.
what the sort of market called for. So at the time, and I agree with you now, it's different. But at the time, I just said, I'm just done. I mean, I was on Sirius XM for
Mhm.
many, many years. And I was like, I don't even want the fight anymore. Like, I don't even want to
Yep.
try
I get
because
it.
I
I
just
get it.
found it devastating. And I was like, I don't want to feel shitty. Like, I
Yep.
don't need that feeling. And so, because rejection, when it's because of kind of your ability to tell a story or to
Hmm.
connect or
Hmm.
whatever, that makes sense. But not when it
Yep.
feels like it's because you have wrinkles and that you're not
Yeah.
34 or 39 or 42.
Yeah, you're fighting on a double front there, right? You're
Yeah.
and you're right. And that's, you know, again, that's something else that has been in our minds. It's been
Yeah.
society tells us that, you know, that you're past your age, you're past your worth, you're past
Yeah.
your whatever, and now there's somebody up coming up behind you, so be careful. And then that causes all that conflict that I think really sucks, because I want to bring up a woman behind me. I don't want to feel scared or resentful or afraid or, you
Right.
know,
No. Mm-mm.
competitive. And
Yeah.
so
No,
I've
no, of
really
course.
changed my mindset about paying attention to that and paying attention to really what's important for me first. And that
Yeah.
changed my whole outlook, which was really nice. And in talking about this and having these conversations openly and knowing what other women, I don't know that you and I would have had this conversation 10 years ago. Do
I
you
don't know
think
that
we would have both
no,
been
because
like,
I went through it. I mean,
yeah,
I went through not being, it was just when one of my contracts didn't get renewed, a TV thing, I knew it was because they wanted kind of the younger, whatever. And it was just as painful as it was, there was just like my
yeah.
hands in the air, kind of
Oh,
like, what are you
totally.
gonna do? She's nothing. Not
Well,
gonna do
if
much of
I had been
any.
in your life, I would have been
Yeah.
cheering you on as well.
It's
I
fine. It
get
was
it.
fine.
I
And I'm
get it.
really okay. I don't even, I actually, it's a much, you do TV every day and you're great at it. And this is your destiny and you're being your life. And so I get it. And for you, it's right. And you were cut out for that. I wasn't cut out to do that fight because it just, I just couldn't, I didn't want to lose
I know.
sleep over it anymore. And so, but I
But I
admire
feel like
the
I've
fact that you
stopped doing
did.
that now.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, there were tough years in there, and then
Yeah.
then it came like it ebbed and flow. You know, it was like
And it
really
has
tough,
changed. Yeah.
and then but then also when I stopped being so concerned about
Yeah.
what I thought everybody else was concerned with, and I went, "What's the worst thing that can happen? What are you going to do? Like, what's the worst
Right.
thing that can happen? I will
Right.
figure it out." And
Yes.
so, and I think that that's what gave me that. I never understood the word bold. Really, I was like,
Mhm.
oh, okay. I mean, it's yeah, you got some bravado, but the bold in that I'm going to do what's right for me, and if it doesn't work
Mhm.
for you, I'll still be okay.
Yes.
Scary thing when you're in your 20s or your 30s. When you hit your
Yes.
40s, you hit your 50, and then you know, so when I say I'm looking forward to like what the next 5 years bring, like if I look at my boldness now versus what it was 5 years ago, and I'm wondering what it's going to be five more, I can't wait because I
But
see some
yeah.
incredible people out there.
But tell me this, you went through a whole shift years ago too. So like I feel like
Yeah.
you've this isn't your first kind of go around with speaking out about something that wasn't part of the everyday conversation. Certainly not someone in entertainment, so, right? That this wasn't what
Right.
people were typically talking about around the water cooler. And years ago, you
Mm-mm.
had a public relationship fall apart. You had and you were a matchmaker, right? And it was like a
Business fall
whole,
apart.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then but you managed to have enough understanding of who that you are that it didn't matter ultimately. The hardship, it sucked and you had to get through it,
Yeah.
but you knew that you know who you are. And so that happens, and it's not all you, right? It's beyond your control, frankly, when things like that go
Yeah.
on. And you
It,
chose
it
to
was
rise
beyond my
above it.
control.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was beyond my control. I certainly didn't expect it to get the attention it got um because I was in news, and really I think it was more because of the business we had. That's,
Yeah.
that's what I think it was. I mean, who couldn't write those headlines? Like a couple that owns
Yeah.
a matchmaking business divorce. Like, oh, if you hand me that story, I'm like, I know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Being part of the story that was
So hard.
a different thing. Yeah, but I even remember back then I was talking to somebody who was in the business and said, like, "Well, I don't think you should go out there talking too much about it. Say no comment, move on." And so I did. I did that in the papers, and then I could not get it out of my gut. And I said, I have to talk about this. And so I wound up writing a
Amazing.
book about being single again. And because single at 41 and 2 and 3 and 4 was scary, for me, because of the mindset that I had,
Yeah.
like, I waited this long to get married, and now I'm going through a divorce after, a short amount of years. So yeah, I did talk about it then. And it's funny, it was actually Stacey London who said to me, "I
I
remember you
love
all these
her.
years ago." Me too. And I remember you talking about this taboo subject back then. And I go, "What taboo subject?" And she goes, "Divorce." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I never even put those two things together."
It's true.
But back then you weren't running around talking about it and being so open. I think that uh the younger generation has shown us it's okay to show our vulnerabilities, and we're not going to be judged for them, like I
Yeah.
think how you and I probably grew up that we would be.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the generation of perfection, and the Gen X of everything's okay, I don't have any problems. And so yeah, so I feel good about being able to be vulnerable and not fearing the consequences.
I think it helps a lot of people, Tamsin. I
Thank
think
you.
it's, I mean, I know it does, because there are so many women who still kind of get stuck in that thing of divorce being somehow a mark of sorts. And it's just not. Not every
I agree with you.
relationship
It's
is
not a
meant to
failure.
last forever, whether or not there's a marriage license. It is not a failure
Yes.
at all. It's a
Amen.
life event,
Amen
and
to that.
it's something that you get to mourn and go through, and it's
Yeah.
painful. But
Yeah.
it's not an indication of anything about you other than that relationship didn't work out right. Like anyone's relationship could not
Isn't
work
that
out right.
amazing
It's the
though?
most
Isn't that amazing?
ridiculous. It's amazing how
Yeah.
people can have this sort of, yeah, they ascribe all sorts of things that just don't exist. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. You're
you and
so
I,
right.
yeah, you and I are the same year. I think I
Hmm.
graduated
Yep.
college. Yeah, college in 92. So
Yep. Me too.
yeah, and I think our generation, you're right. I think there was that, not just like the need for perfection theoretically, which all of us know is an impossibility. So that was fun. But like we never ever tapped into what was going on. We never tapped into under the
Oh my
surface.
gosh.
My mother had a prophylactic
No.
hysterectomy because her mother later in life had gotten ovarian cancer at like 76, which isn't really a
Hmm.
sign of anything other than everyone gets cancer when they're old kind of thing. But
Sure.
my mother has a hysterectomy at 50 years old before she went through menopause. So my sister and I have no
Wow.
understanding of what menopause would be. Then she
Yeah.
was on Premarin until she
Oh my
got
gosh. Yep.
pancreatic
Yep.
cancer, and then she died at 65.
Hmm.
So
I'm
up
so
until the
sorry.
time, thank you, it was still not great. Up until the time she was 64 years old and got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, she was on Premarin. So we
Hmm.
don't have
Hmm.
any idea what it looks like to actually age. My sister and I scratch our heads. We're like, well, what would mommy have done? And what happened with mom?
Right.
Because we just have no context. And I think so many of us have that.
I couldn't agree more. My mother was diagnosed with breast cancer when she was 44, and
Oh,
she died at 51. But
oh, you poor thing.
a similar. Well, thank you. But I mean, I understand what you're talking about,
But I
but it
understand
was,
you every day. I'm so you were
yeah,
so young. That's not how it's supposed to be.
it's not right. And, I didn't realize really until about a year, 2 years ago. It's funny. My father's 83, and he and I were talking, but so my mother was diagnosed at 44. She had her first mastectomy around 40 45, I think, because they had done like radiation
Mhm.
before that. But she clearly went into menopause sometime during that because she was
They probably
still
put her
kind of
into
young
it.
for.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a medically, surgically, medically
Yeah.
induced menopause. And then she had a second mastectomy because the cancer came back. So she was for sure in menopause. And I remember she would be sweating all the time. And we'd go into a restaurant and she's like, I can't stay in here. It's just too hot. And she'd always have like water she'd be putting on herself. And I thought, like, what is going on? At first I thought, well, maybe it's the medicine. But then when she was off the chemo and on the chemo, it was still the same thing. And I wanted to cry when I came to this realization when I like, oh my gosh, and I was probably interviewing one of the doctors and I said, my mother was in menopause, going through cancer, raising two children that were, my brother was not even a teenager yet. I was a teenager and in the throes of high school, like probably a big pain in the butt. A young woman in her 40s or late 40s going through all that and menopause on top of it and no one to talk to about it, because she had a mother that did not talk about those kind of things. I remember that about my grandmother. And my father and I were talking. My father said, I saw some of your videos on Instagram, which is so unlikely that he would even be seeing them. And he
Yeah.
said, I think your mom was going through menopause. And I said,
Mm.
yeah, I think so too, Dad. And that was like, it still chokes me up because unbelievable. Like all these years later that both of us came to that realization of what she went through by herself. But just to say that you, me, so many other women didn't even have an example of what aging looked like, right? More or less this particular transition in our lives.
Yeah, but Tamsin, I think this gives, I mean, it's no wonder that you sort of barreled through the divorce and the business
Yeah.
and decided, fuck
Yeah.
it, I got to just move forward. Or that you go through
I mean,
menopause
when you go
and,
through that,
yeah, well, because you get to live to tell it. So I think there
yeah,
must be a part of you, and you could speak to this, that every day that you get past the age of your mother,
a
man,
hundred percent,
like what was that
a
like for
hundred
you
percent.
when you were 51?
You,
Like, what was that?
well, it's funny because 50 wasn't my problem.
Uh-huh.
51 was.
Right.
51 was my kind of freak out moment. So,
Yeah.
and it was, being sad and grateful at the same time,
Yeah.
sad because like I couldn't believe how young she was in retrospect. When I was 20, I just turned 20 when my mother died.
Mm.
We had just moved to a new city. I was in college, and she died the day after Christmas. And I remember, 51 at 20 it seems older, right? It's like it's a grown up, and now 51, like what this. She was this age. And even when I turned, so 2 years that were very hard for me, 44 and 51. 44 when
Right.
she was diagnosed and
Of
51 when
course.
she died. And yeah, so it was a lot. And then getting on the other side of it, now I'm like, oh wow, at 52 I didn't know what to do. I felt very lost. I felt
Yeah.
very lost with that. Isn't that odd? And I know there's some people that don't have their mothers even as long as I did. So I'm
Oh,
always aware of
it's
that.
not to put, you're not, I
I
mean,
just,
you're not supposed to lose your
I
mother when you're
know.
20. You're just not. You're still a
Yeah.
child. Our
Yeah.
brains aren't fully
Yeah. You're
formed till
still a child.
25. You're still a child. I mean,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah. And it's that height of that time when you're like, who am I?
oh,
What am I supposed to, where am I going? What am I doing next?
oh, oh,
But for any woman out there that doesn't have that mother, I want to be that aunt, that sister, that voice, that
right.
whatever
And
it
I get
is.
that.
If
I
it's a
get
little bit of
that.
information, yeah, that's
Yeah.
important to me.
How do you manage health anxiety? How do you manage sort of the idea of, is there cancer around the corner? Is there something that's going to take you
Oh,
out too
yeah.
young? Or have you gotten a hold of that because you're past 51?
Uh, no, I don't think you ever get a hold of it because I think it's always this, it's always sits over you, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that it just sits there. It's just
Mm-hmm.
always this, you got a cough. I'm like, is that cancer? Is it like
Right.
everything is that? I don't go to like, is
Everything
it a
is that
cold or
cancer.
COVID? I'm like, is
Uh-huh.
it cancer?
Uh-huh.
And so that's been like that for a long time. And the hard days of for me anyway, the mammograms and the extra, the extra
Yeah.
extra and all the, when they hear your mother is diagnosed that young, you start your baseline of a mammogram 10 years before that.
That's
So
right. That's
I don't even
yeah.
know what the real time. Yeah, I started at 34. So
Yeah.
I've been very aware of that, health and wellness and what it takes to pay attention to it. And so, yes, that's
So
what
I
a lot
think
of my,
that's,
it's funny.
yeah.
It all sits back there as part of the journey, but you don't realize it. Yeah. I didn't really
Yeah.
realize it until this.
Yeah. I think it takes away a lot of the bullshit. You don't have time. You don't have time for
Yeah,
that.
I don't have any time.
I mean, not for real.
I've
Yeah.
seen the worst. I've seen the
But
worst. The rest of
yeah.
it is all kind of like, okay. I saw what it looks like. I saw what that next part looks like. And,
Yeah.
about almost 2 years ago, I lost my stepmother to breast cancer
Mm.
too. So I
Oh,
kind of relived that whole thing. So I'm very, very aware of women's health, the need for more
yeah.
research, the need for more research dollars. I had no idea. I thought, I don't know. I don't know what we think. Well, if you're not in the middle of all that, you don't really know you're not paying attention. We're
You
going through
have to
life.
advocate for
And
yourself too,
you've
because
got to, you've got to.
yeah, because the gynecologists don't really know about menopause. It's few and far between the ones
No,
who do. They have to make a
no.
choice. And when I was from 48 to probably this year, I was banging my head against the wall. Why won't somebody answer me? Because there's has been such a dearth in the conversation. Nobody was discussing it. And
Mhm.
now I'm finally getting like conversations and answers. Women feel like we're doing something wrong because we have menopausal symptoms.
Yeah, like because we can't get a handle on it and just kind of
Yeah.
push through. And
Yeah.
that's you bring up such a good point because you're right. It is like, really, is that it? Like I had a male gynecologist when I started this journey, and after I did my blood panels, and
Yeah.
I never really stopped bleeding because I had endometrium polyps. So I had a
Oh,
couple of surgeries. No one ever mentioned perimenopause. Never, never, never. And I went to him. We did my blood panels, and he wrote in my patient portal, in menopause, any questions? In menopause. Then it was like, any questions,
what a
and then his name.
dick.
And I went, what? And so I remember I was in the airport, Tampa, heading back to New York, and I'm like this. I'm in, I'm in menopause. Like what? Like I couldn't believe it. I wasn't even offended by that at that point. I was so upset about like just trying to process that. And then when I
Yeah.
get back, I'm like, what the heck? What kind of
Yeah.
what is that?
Yeah.
What
You
if I
don't curse. You're
couldn't
so
handle
nice.
that? What if?
Do you curse in
Oh,
real
I do.
life or just not on a
Of
podcast?
course.
Because I curse here and
Oh,
it's
just
fine.
of
My listeners are
course.
so
Of
used to my
course.
cursing. No, but that's just right. It's insensitive, is what it is. It's just insensitive.
Well, it also makes you feel like I'm alone. What's wrong with me? Is this
Yeah.
the end? I don't have children, and I had made that decision after my divorce, and then like, oh my God, am I never gonna have children? Even though I'd already made the decision.
Right.
When you hear that, you're like,
Right.
oh my God, now it's officially over. So
Right.
it just everything just like a whole big crap stew of like everything that's
Everything you have to deal with at
wrong.
once. Yeah.
Everything you have to deal with in that one little patient portal message.
Yeah, it's actually
Yeah.
cruel. And it's cruel whether you've chosen to have children or not chosen to have
Yeah.
children or couldn't have children or could have children. There's all different ways
Right.
to be a woman, right? It doesn't, none of it
Oh,
should be
a
sort of
1000%.
like, but
Yeah. Your badge.
oh God, yeah, no, please, no. Mm-mm. It's because none of it's easy. There isn't an easy road traveled as a
Nope.
female, period.
Nope.
So whatever
I
your
know.
choice is.
I thought this was going to be the one. You always think this is going to be the one after your periods over. You don't realize it's just starting. I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
what in the world is this now?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
menopause was really for me. I mean, the physical symptoms obviously were really awful, but the debilitating part was the brain fog
So what'd you do about it?
the
What
fact that my
what worked for you?
confidence just went to
Yeah.
crap. Well, I wound up going on replacement therapy, MRT or menopause
And
replacement
you
therapy
were
now.
able to do it. Okay.
So that was a big question because of my
Yeah.
mom. And I remember when I set out looking for this, I was like all natural. All I knew
Yeah.
was like, estrogen bad in my head.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know anything about the 2002 study that had the headlines that scared so many women
That
saying that
was
estrogen's bad, estrogen's bad.
right.
But so I was worried about that. But when I wound up with a doctor, and I did what you did, I had a journey of a bunch of different doctors and a bunch of different like appointments that sucked and appointments that were good. And I wound up finding somebody that I really felt comfortable with. And she said to me, listen, like, I can show you the numbers. I can show you how we get to where we get to, and I can show you the different
Yes.
calculations we do. But, I don't have the BRCA gene,
Great.
thankfully. where my mother's history was to, where mine is and my age and all
Yes.
sorts of, they literally did
Yes.
calculations with a calculator. And they said that was gonna be okay, that the benefits far outweigh the risk. And I
That's
will
right.
tell you, I had the hormones in my medicine cabinet for a long time before I started taking them, because I was scared. I was very nervous about it, and every time I put the patch on, I'm like, oh God, am I doing the right thing? But how I feel now compared to how I felt then, and I felt like a shell of a human being and just a fraction of who I was before. I just feel very, very different. But not every, that's not a solution for everybody.
No,
So
but I
it's
think,
not something that everyone
yeah,
wants to do.
you did your due diligence. And I think that
Yep,
that
that's first for
report
me.
and those headlines years ago were gross sort of messaging miscalculations and didn't really
Hmm.
explain the numbers. It was such a low percentage actually of the people that
Yep,
it was really dangerous for. And then there was kind of different levels depending on what was what, and heart disease versus cancer risk. And so I
yep.
think that you're right in taking the time to decide, and good that you got the help that you needed. Brain fog sucks.
Yeah,
Not, yeah.
brain fog sucks. It
And
really
not
does.
finding the
I mean,
words. Like, I can't find words some days.
it,
I can't find them.
it
I
shot my
cannot find
confidence.
them.
It shot my no, me neither. And it shot my confidence. And so now every once in a while I'm doing brain things. I like play puzzles. I do all
It's
these
good.
different things now that I never, if you told me I was doing a crossword puzzle before, I'd be like, you're out of your mind. I don't have time for
Yeah.
a crossword puzzle. I can barely but now I do it because it's like my brain is really ultra important to me, more so than it's
Yeah.
ever been.
Yeah. You have to read, you have to do brain teasers, you got to do the puzzles. That's why
I
Wordle was
know.
good. Like those kind of
I know.
get your
Thank
brain
God for Wordle.
activated. Wordle got a lot of us to like think a little bit more than we'd been thinking. It's a
Oh,
very, in fact,
oh,
I was saying how when I launched this podcast, I had to learn a bunch of new skills that I never had. I had to learn how to edit. I had to
yeah,
learn how to
yeah.
do things that I'm not technically savvy. I'm 53 years old. Who's technically savvy at 53 years old? We missed that. We missed the
I
cutoff.
know.
But the fact that like the learning of it felt so good because I was like, wait, there are
Yeah,
synapses. They're connecting.
it's
Oh my
working.
God.
It's
Yeah.
working.
Yeah. I was like, my brain still works. It's there. It's in there because you're right. They're like when the words don't come, like the words that you know that should be there, and then they don't. And I'll go through a Rolodex in my brain. Rolodex. Who else but a
Yep.
53-year-old would know
Yeah,
the word
I know.
Rolodex? But I'll go or Filofax, but I'll like go back and
I
I'll,
knew. I didn't even catch it. I'm like, yeah, the Rolodex. I got
of
it.
course,
I got
right? Of
it.
course you got it. You're my age. But I value when I learn now. Now, was that part of why you went to the Integrative Institute of Nutrition? Did you want to? I know you're a certified menopause coach,
Yeah.
but did you want the? Were you on a quest to also like learn and re-engage and to go because school's hard?
Oh, I forgot about that. So when I signed up for it, I was like, I'm gonna learn everything I need to know about my body. I'm gonna learn how to conquer this. I'm gonna learn what I don't know. I'm gonna figure this all out. And yes, school's hard. First of all, my concentration is way not there. Like it's very clear to me that I do not have the concentration that I had when I was at any other point in my life.
Yeah.
My retention sucks.
Yes.
But it was really important, right? It was really important to me to learn. And what I liked about the course that I took and the certification that I got as a result of that was the fact that it wasn't about like diet and exercise, and the primary food was
Yeah.
really about all the rest of your life. And then
Yeah.
everything else was about nutrition and food. So I learned a lot about nutrition and food, but I needed to eat differently. Like I
Mhm.
couldn't go out for Mexican food at, 1 o'clock in the morning after the
Right.
newscast and have margaritas and
Right.
and then wake up the next morning at 6 o'clock and go to the gym. Like it didn't work anymore.
No.
And I didn't want to stop living my life either. I didn't want to be like, okay, I don't need anything and I'm this and I'm that free and I'm this free and I'm that free. I'm not. And so I wanted to learn what would work for me, but I could still live my life. And so that was in part why I went, but also to understand the other things around that I could do and to be able to talk to people and feel comfortable that what I was saying to them would be helpful. I'm not a doctor, but I wanted to be able to help. I mean, and that's what I think that coaches can do. And so I didn't intend to do it to start a coaching practice or anything, but I really wanted to be able to be, and I have so much respect actually for like wellness coaches and people that do that now, because that's like a real thing. There's a real certification there if you're going to go
Yeah.
through that process. It really is.
Yeah, I think you probably needed a deeper understanding too of all of it.
Yeah. Yes. 100%. I need to,
Yeah.
and I needed to know like what all these supplements were in my closet. I had a whole thing of supplements. I'm like, what does that say it fixes? Oh, I'm going
Yeah.
to take 2 of those. I'll buy one, get one free of those. I had a
Yeah.
thing of supplements that like, and took 2 from each bottle. But anyway,
Yeah,
you
no,
have to
and
go through all of it, right?
now at least you know it. And I know you've built this big community on TikTok and on Instagram of women who look to you for advice if they're falling apart in their bathrooms, or they can't see whatever it is that they're looking at, or they can't remember the code to sign into their Amazon account because they have to switch from screen to screen to screen to screen to screen to remember
Yes.
four stupid fucking
Yes.
numbers. I mean, it's real. It's real.
Wait, I did that tonight with my Spectrum accounts.
It happened
Yes.
to me today
It's
with
really real.
some bank account. They were like, your verification number is, and I no joke, I had to
My
keep going
verification code. I'm
back.
like, where
I
is
kept
that?
right. I kept losing like three of the numbers, and I had to keep going. And I know you could copy and paste some of the time. Anyway, it was ugly. It's hard.
I have no patience with it. So I keep clicking resend code. And then I get like
Resend.
5 codes. And I'm
Uh
like,
huh.
oh
Uh huh.
crap. Which code are we on?
Uh
I
huh.
get it though. I really get it. Yeah, I like to talk, the women that have joined me in that community are like they've taught me a lot about myself, first of all. And I really enjoy sharing information of what I've learned, and then they share information too. So it's not a one-way street. So that's a nice thing about it. And we talk a little bit about everything like midlife, menopause. And my big one and how I started this was finding meaning. Like I went through this stage before the pandemic of this now what? Like, now what am I supposed to be doing in life?
Yeah.
And I kept
Yeah.
wandering around, like feeling very, very lost. And that was before the pandemic. Imagine my poor husband. But during the pandemic, because he wound up
Yeah.
moving from LA to New York, I'm like, I'm so sorry. So I'm menopausal. I'm the menopausal bride,
I'm a
and there's a
great time.
pandemic. So you're
Uh
stuck
huh.
with me,
Uh huh. So much
and I
fun.
love you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a blast. I'm
Uh
not quite
huh.
the girl you met, right?
Uh huh.
But yeah. So anyway,
That part is so hard, by the way, in marriages because, like, I know that as much as my husband can be an asshole, because he's my husband, right? And we're together
yeah.
27 years. So I really know him and I
Oh
really
wow!
love him.
Congratulations. Yeah,
No, I love the guy, but he can be an asshole. Like every husband can be an asshole.
I
But
get it.
sometimes I have to check myself and say, like,
Yeah.
okay, wait, is today he's actually being an asshole? Or today am I clouded because of like perimenopause and my mood
Yeah.
is
Through my
detrimental to
hormones.
anybody I'm going to be around?
Yeah.
So whose fault is it today? So I know exactly what you're talking about, your poor husband. Like, cause,
I was.
right.
I feel like he felt tricked because he felt this. He had this girl that was like,
Duped.
"I'm going to go
Yeah.
out tonight. Let's go get some wine. Let's go
Bait
meet
and
after the
switch.
show." And then bait and switch. That's what I say to him all the time. I'm like, "Do you feel like I bait and switched you? Because I kind of feel like I might have." Then all of a sudden, I'm like, what? No, not
Yeah.
tonight. I got to put lotions on." So yeah,
Yeah.
poor guy. He's
Yep.
very patient though. He hangs in there.
Oh, it's so nice. But
I
that's what you
know.
want. You want somebody. I actually say this to my friends. If you can get through this midlife place with your partner, then the
Yeah,
rest is almost, I mean, it's smooth sailing, but for all the tragedy
easy
that
street.
happens around you and whatever. But it's
Of course,
within the relationship, when you could get past this, the midlife stuff is so tough. This 50 is,
I
it's
know.
great on some levels, but our bodies are doing all sorts of things, women and men. And it's not really, again, it's still not talked about enough, whether it's hypertension when you've never had it or a weird blood
Yeah.
test that you don't know what that's about. It's all jarring and there's
Abnormal
no
Pap
label.
smear.
And it,
What?
right. An
Yeah.
abnormal pap smear. You have to go back again. Yeah.
That's a once a year fear aside,
Right.
along with the
Of course.
the mammogram. Yeah, you know
Of
what I've
course.
noticed? I've been looking at relationships that seem to work in the midlife, and I'm seeing a lot of people like do things together, which I know sounds kind of generic, but I've been watching some people like take up a new thing together, and I didn't
Yeah,
realize how
it's
important that
nice.
was. But I think that
Yeah.
that's the way you have to do it, whatever it is, whatever you have time for. I don't know,
Agreed. That's right.
but yeah, I feel like that growth is there because you're growing in another stage in a different way, and I didn't put too much stock in that, and now I'm
Yeah.
realizing how the couples that I look at as examples are the ones that are doing that, and they're just putting that little extra effort in, so they stay alive, they feel alive.
Yes. That's right. Well, that's why dogs are good. I know. I'm sorry that you just lost yours.
I love
I know a
dogs.
year ago, but it's
Oh, thank
get you.
you. No,
But
it's just
eventually, maybe you'll get another dog because
I will. I just need that,
there's
like, I was like,
mhm.
I can't do that to him yet But yeah, he's
Yeah.
18. He lived like an amazing life.
I mean,
He
incredible
he
life.
lived an amazing life.
But that's what keeps
He
like
really did.
it keeps us from just staying on the couch, essentially. Like it keeps us
Yeah,
from just
totally.
disengaging from the world because
Yep.
we have to show up for the dogs. So like we
Yeah,
can't take to the bed by meaning sleeping, napping for extended period of time because the dogs have to
yeah,
go out. Like they need us to
of
care for them.
course.
Yeah.
But that's real. I mean,
Yeah.
those are the things I'm talking about. Like
Yeah.
those are meaningful things. I think yeah, I just think that creates or keeps youthfulness somewhere in the relationships, because you hear a lot about what they call, I hate the word, they call gray divorces, like divorces in midlife.
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah.
real thing,
It's
because
a real
people
thing.
all of a sudden, like they've grown apart, now they're coming together, and now they're like, wait, who are you, what?
Right.
So
Right.
I do get a lot of those questions, and menopause, is a whole nother problem, because if you don't have somebody that is okay with you, I said my
That's
husband's heard
right.
the word vagina across
Uh,
the dining room table like so many
correct.
times. He's like
It's
wants to pull his
healthy.
hair out, and he's like, I am on a conference call. You cannot yell out vagina. I'm on a conference call, and I'm like, yeah, but that's my business.
Right.
So
I'd yell it
when
out
I'm talking
louder. No,
menopause, and
but
so I'm
it's normal. I mean, that's the so tell me about the podcast so people can listen to it. How often is it?
uh,
It's everywhere you get your
oh yes,
podcasts.
it's every year podcast coming up next. We took a little bit of a hiatus. We're going to come back because I needed to like kind of regroup. I just sold a book on menopause, so that's going to be
Great.
coming out in about a year. So I'm
That's so
excited about
exciting.
that, and
Yeah.
I needed to just work on it a little bit because I really want it to. It's important for me for it to have that community feel. That's really what,
Yes.
for me, everything has been built on, and so it just takes a lot of interviews and talking. But I'm real excited about it, and I'm excited about it because I want the education part of this is everything. Like getting through it is, you can do that, but you've got to be educated about it first. You've got to know how to advocate for yourself, and you've got to know how to deal with it in the workplace. Like that's another, a big thing for me. There's a
Yes.
lot of women, that are this age now, that are the height of their careers, and they're trying to, they're walking into a boardroom and feel like they're going to strip down their, to their bra, just to kind of get through a presentation. And I've heard from so many of them that are so frustrated. And so to me, that's really important to make sure that they have those answers that they need.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're doing this because it
Well, thank you
matters.
for
Because
letting me talk about it.
oh my gosh, it's so nice to
It's
see you.
important.
Tamsen Fadal is everywhere on social media, so find her and look for her podcast, which is coming back when it comes back. I'm going to put it like that.
Yes.
And
Perfect.
but you're so active on social media, so they can follow you to see all the shows that you're on. If they're not in your markets, they can watch you online,
Yep.
which is so cool, right? Because people can see you
Yes.
in any state.
Isn't that
How
nice
cool is
now?
that?
Everything's
Yeah, it's
changed,
so
right?
yeah,
Right?
it's great. Yeah. Thank you for
The
being on
world
my
has
podcast.
changed.
I know. In some
Oh,
ways
thank you
good,
for having me.
in some ways not. I I'm at Just Jenny Hutt on Instagram. I'm at Jenny Hutt on TikTok and Twitter. And any questions or comments, email justjennypod@gmail.com. And I'll be back here per usual tomorrow. Thank you, Tamsen.